Well, so as we, we're sort of holding the date and planning this a few months ago, who would have known what would be going on in the world at this time? But I know you've been busy the last few days, and I'd just like to hear how you see the war in Ukraine impacting um, global access to food and
Well,
during this hard time. Mhm.
we are as a global community, we're focused as we should be on the people of Ukraine
Mhm.
and the now 2 million refugees that some say
Yeah,
could go to as much as 7 million refugees, and those who are men putting their wives and their children on
yeah,
trains to try and get them out, women delivering babies in hallways because hospitals are closed or bombed. You saw the babies being moved from ICU units into trains and train stations so that they could get them to facilities where they could continue to provide the support that was necessary. What the world is just beginning to recognize or realize is that Ukraine, we often describe Ukraine as the breadbasket of Europe.
mhm,
That the Ukraine and Russia together produce about 30% of all of the wheat that is consumed across the globe on an annual basis. But
mhm,
what we also don't fully did not fully recognize is until
mhm,
now is that between Belarus, which is we have now there are now sanctions on Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine.
mhm.
All much of the potash that supports our fertilizers is produced in those countries as well. So what we're now seeing are wheat futures that are skyrocketing because not just because the farmers in Ukraine have stopped farming, because the rural areas are oftentimes, and the Ukraine is no different, the first areas where you have bombs that are
Mhm.
dropped, and so farmers don't farm if their physical security of themselves and their family are limited. And so during a period of time when farmers should be in the fields planting for the next harvest, they're not out there. So that affects those who import wheat from Ukraine, which is the North Africa and the Middle East, and Turkey, Egypt. But
Wow.
the and
Yeah.
so that's you can see that but the externalities that you don't see are the high price um, of fertilizer and the effect that that will have, not just on poor for the 500 million smallholder farmers that produce about 80% of the food that is consumed in the countries where they farm, but also on farmers in Iowa. And so
Uh-huh.
we know that when farmers use less fertilizer, that they get less yield.
Right.
And
Right.
so where farmers don't have and can't afford the fertilizer that they need, we will have a longer term reduction in yields, not just in wheat then, but also in corn.
Mhm.
We will also, so you have high futures, you have increased gas prices. We're
Mhm.
seeing gas prices that
Mhm.
have not been this high
Yeah.
since the 2008 food crisis. You have the um, the the challenge of a net exporting country, the Ukraine, and the effect that that will have on net importing countries. And as the all of those factors become more they become more pronounced, we will the concern is that we will result in export bans, because if we're not growing
Mm.
enough food
Mhm.
in the net exporting countries, that we'll see export bans where countries try to protect their own food
Yes.
security.
Yes.
And what that means is that then in the net importing countries, the Haitis, the Ghanas, the
Mhm.
Ethiopia, the places where we depend on a functioning global food system, you will see higher price food. And the one thing I've spent a lot of time researching the relationships between conflict and hunger. And what the data does not support is a direct causal relationship between hunger and conflict and instability. But what the data does support
Mhm.
is a direct causal relationship between
Mm.
acute high food prices
Yes.
and instability in countries that depend upon the import of that
Yeah.
food, particularly when we see that instability occurring, when countries don't have the sovereign wealth to support
Mhm.
the purchase of food that would keep those prices at a level where working people
Yes,
can afford bread.
yes.
Because the
Yeah,
chronically hungry,
yeah,
the most
yeah.
vulnerable, they don't march in the streets.
Mhm.
The people who march in the streets are the people who get up and work every day and
Mm.
then can't
Can't
afford
afford
bread
bread.
for their children. And the possibility of that happening, we're beginning to see all of those indicators go from red to green as the conflict in Ukraine is affecting all of these other pieces that are, because we're so, our food system is so interconnected. And so what I've been working to do since we started watching grain futures
Mhm.
is raising the alarm with
Yeah.
a group of cohorts around the globe who are working with me to develop the pathways that the global community, but private sector, the UN, governments, the G7, the G20, the things that we need to do ahead of time
Yeah.
to forestall a high food price crisis, or at the
Mhm.
very least to mitigate
Mhm.
the impact of a significant spike in food prices. We see it coming. It's the old adage, the too often used adage, you can see the train coming down the track. The question
Yeah.
is, can we as a global community work together to hit the brakes in time to avoid and another 100 million, 200 million increase in the number of people who are food insecure across the globe? Because the
Yeah.
one other thing I need to add to this
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
make it a little even more disconcerting for you is that the number of people who were chronically food insecure increased by 100 million because of COVID.
Yes, of
And,
course. That was
and
good. I
because
don't
of
need to ask you the
COVID.
next question.
Yes. And so now it is
Yeah.
those same communities,
Yes.
many of those same communities and populations that will feel the effect of this high food price crisis if we don't address these issues in a timely way. And
Mhm.
so you are exacerbating a problem that is already affecting food security for so
Yes.
many
Yes.
in countries around the globe.
Yeah.